Hey everyone, George Christie here with Wine Industry Network. Welcome to another edition of our Win Insider series. It's a chance where we get to meet different folks in the industry who serve different roles, different backgrounds, different perspective, but they share a passion for our industry. And this is a chance to get to know them a little bit more about what they do and who they are and what their thoughts are on things that are impacting the industry right now. So today we've got Glenn Proctor. Glenn is a partner over at the Ciatti Company and also owner and I think winemaker for Puccioni Vineyards, Puccioni, right, Glenn?
This is true. This is true. Yes.
So I want to start with, let's start with your role at Ciatti, and then we're going to talk about some other stuff. But just so people understand what your role is there as a partner, kind of a little bit on a day-to-day basis. What do you do over there?
A good question. Probably my partners would like to know the answer to that. Yeah, no, Ciatti, we're a global wine and grape broker. We've been in business for over 50 years, since 1972 or 1973. So we've been doing this a while. But so I'm one of the owners, partners at Ciatti. So day to day, I focus most of my energy on California in terms of California bulk wine activity and grape activity. We have a very good team with a lot of people that are, committed to this business and work hard very every day. But so our job is to understand the market, kind of what's happening, who's doing what to who. We like to talk about, or reading the tea leaves, and then working with clients and trying to put transactions or deals together. So we're brokering with a buyer and a seller, trying to understand where the opportunities are, and then helping to assist that deal to consummation and execution. So that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. But we tend to have a pretty good ear for what's going on in the industry, and that's a lot. I think what a lot of our clients rely on us for is that information.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's not just domestically, right? So you guys
Oh
have
yeah.
your hands.
Internationally, we've got offices in 9 different countries. So we're working within that with, and for us, an office can be 2 or 3 people. It doesn't need to be as big, but, so we've got offices in all the major wine growing regions of the world. And that gives us a chance to kind of understand that dynamic too, which I think is, as we've seen for some of us, George, that have been in the industry a few years, that, things have changed in terms of how people look at supply, both from a domestic and a global basis in terms of the different brands. And so some of that activity we do is within country. So we do deals, within France between buyers and sellers. Some of that is between countries.
Mhm.
But it does give us a pretty good look at what, what the market is doing in those areas. And you can kind of compare it all around. You get a pretty good view of what the world is doing.
Yeah.
And we try to put some of this together. We do a few reports where we try to put some of this information down, but we're the largest in terms of what we do from a global perspective.
What I imagine though, and I know everyone, they go to like you or one of your teammates and go like, what does this mean? And what's next year going to be like? And how much can I ask? And you're like, okay, I always have to kind of preface it with like, this is what the indicators, these are the indicators. This is what they could mean, but there's no guarantees, right? Because you just don't know.
Well, I can tell you, we had a conversation yesterday, the partner and myself and a client that we work closely with, and kind of he was looking for some advice on market positioning and actions he should or shouldn't take. And after about an hour, we're like, okay, we're still at a coin flip. We've dissected it from this side and from that side, and but a lot of this, especially in uncertain times, and we're kind of living in those right now, it becomes a little harder to say, oh yeah, this is a given, or this is
Yeah.
what expectations are. So decisions are more difficult. We try to come up with as much information as we can. I mean, we don't own the product. The client does, or the buyer will, but try to look at it from what information is available. And that's, you've got to make a decision, especially in the market we're in, and just, in general, you've got to make a decision based on reality.
Yep.
So I mean, it's a lot like I wish it was different, or I wish this was the case, but really, we're there to give, okay, here's what we see, hear, and feel, up to you. But, some of this has to be based in reality, because you make too many decisions based on hope, and
Yeah.
sometimes they get you in trouble. So,
Well, as
yeah.
I said there, at the end of the day, it's still a guess. It could be, well educated, well
Yeah.
informed, but you still kind of go, there's no guarantees, man. There's just no
We knew
guarantee.
what was going to happen. We probably would have had that retirement
Yeah.
house in Maui by now. So, yes.
So, okay, so I want to go back to the beginning because I'm like not growing up here. And I've been here a long time. And I've been in the industry for a long time, but I'm always like super curious about people like yourself that grew up in a multi-generational farming family, right? You
Yep.
went to Pittsburgh High School, and so I want to go back and have you talk a little about Puccioni Vineyards and your family's history here in the area.
Yeah, well, it definitely helped me kind of understand what I wanted to do, or at least what I appreciated. But yeah, my family, my great grandfather came into this area, immigrated over in 1889.
Mhm.
Um, so he then bought the property that we currently own in Dry Creek Valley. It's kind of off of Pachoni Road, right off of Mill Creek Road. And he bought that in 1904.
Now he was in
So
the wine industry too, right? Your
yeah, he
great.
was. No, they had at that time, there's some good historical articles. There's one from 1911 that he had planted by that time 40 acres of grapes.
Okay.
And then from 1920, it's 19, like 1919 to about 1931, they had a winery. So during Prohibition,
Okay.
they were, medicinal or wine that they were producing. If you go back in the records, which we've kind of done for fun, they were investigated twice by the BATF. Some reports of wine missing from some of those barrels that wasn't sold in the legal means. So the rumors always were that there was a guy over when you go out our property the back way, they called the chemist, and then he was the one taking the wine and then distilling that out and selling it through other means. So that was in place too. And then we had the family, I think, after Prohibition for about 3 or 4 years, they had the winery active, and um, then I think at some point they decided to just grow grapes. So we've had, mostly vineyards, but prunes. And when you go back to a lot of the history of this area, 50s and 60s, they did local crops and they raised cattle and sheep. So we had a little bit of everything out there.
Now, did your great grandfather? I was looking at the website. So did he actually work at Italian Swiss colony? Was that his?
Yeah, he did. That's now I've heard varying things, but he worked at that when he first came out.
Okay.
Uh, so the one thing is you understand when and you should know this, given some of your different interactions in Dry Creek, if your
Yeah.
name ends in an I,
Yeah.
or you pretty good chance you're related to everybody. So, he came out, and I think that was a contact he had. So he was employed there, is my understanding. But then, he started. He and his brother-in-law ended up buying that property in 1904. Interestingly enough, in those days, they bought it, and they were able to kind of secure a loan. The story goes that a few years later, after they'd cleared the ground and kind of did a lot of improvements, the person holding the note came out and demanded payment. Kind of like I got you right by the neck. And they had some relatives they could go, and they've got some cash, and were able to meet the obligation and hold on to the property. But some of those stories, I think, in everybody's family, that's been around a long time.
Well, I just think about, so I've been out to the ranch with you, I think one time, maybe more than once, but it's been a long time.
Yep.
And it's for people that don't know the area, it's off of Mill Creek Road, which is sort of starts to get pretty darn rural even today when you get out there. So I can only imagine like what it must have been like in 1904. It must have felt like you were in the, because you already feel like you're in the middle of nowhere now.
Well, having internet is pretty darn hard. I can tell you still.
Yeah.
They, yeah, I think to some degree the story goes is that my great grandfather was offered some property more in Dry Creek proper, off of
Yeah.
Dry Creek Road. Um, and then my understanding he chose that. But you've also got to remember, in those times, there was a lot of milling going on in the lumber industry. So there was timber on parts of that property.
Yeah.
So I think some of that logging, my understanding, they did some charcoal production for local use.
Okay.
So if you go back, there's some work done out of Occidental where they talk about the Italians and kind of assimilating to that community, and they did this charcoal local production so you could live off your land as you developed it. So I think the resources there is why he chose that property
Yeah.
relative to maybe a different area. But no, you're out there. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of neighbors, and that's it's so neat about the property and why we continue to. I don't, and not in my lifetime. I don't think we're getting rid of it, but you can go out there and not know. I mean, you can, wow, it's pretty quiet. I mean,
Yeah.
you're in a different place, and
Yeah.
in this day and age, there's kind of a lot to appreciate about that.
Well, I know, again, I read, doing my homework, your mom grew up, or she was born on the ranch. Did
Yep.
your mom grow up out there as well?
Yeah, she grew up out there. So yeah, she Hillsburg High School. Then she grew up out there, was ended up being a teacher in Hopland. That's how she met my dad.
Okay.
Uh, but yes, both sides of my family, because of my family in the Mendocino County area came in 1906. So that's the Rossetti side.
Okay.
So yeah, no, there's a few, but she grew up out there. And then with my grandfather, Louis, who there's still a few people that remember him. Um, that's kind of, I was out there every weekend as a kid. So it would be Friday evening till Sunday night, working, cooking, hunting. So that was a little bit of my existence,
Yeah.
as I grew up.
Well, that's funny. I was thinking about, that's kind of my question, that property must hold a very special place for you. I mean, obviously, you're still out there farming it and overseeing things, but I was imagining you as a kid, you must have spent a ton of time out there. And I was reading something too. It said your grandfather was the last person to farm with a mule in Dry Creek Valley, which seems crazy.
Well, we put commercially because I'm sure somebody will
Commercially, yeah, yeah.
argue that point. But no, we had, and it's interesting because I just had found some old videos. Remember the Super 8 tapes? I mean, I'm older than you, but they would, you'd take those real things,
Yeah,
and
yeah, we're
I
pretty
had
close.
found some, and we digitized it, but not. So I haven't reworked. But there's until 68, he worked the ground with a mule and a single horse plow off of a mule. And that's the way he turned the ground. So we've got some really good shots of that. And then there's a few of me learning, behind him. I had to be 4 or 5 years old, stuck me behind there, and here you go. I was a little bit my grandfather. He knew what he was doing, but he wasn't easy. He had always had kind of high expectations.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, so we used that until I think it was like said 68. And then the mule passed away. My uncle would always say, "Don't say we worked the mule to death." And I said, "I think people understand that." But and then he ended up, at that point in the late 60s, he gets a tractor from the early 50s,
Yeah.
Johnny Pop John Deere, and starts pulling that, to turn the ground. So he went to a disc, but this is my grandfather. He's like, "Well, the disc does not turn like the plow. It just isn't the same." So probably a couple years later, I'm driving the John Deere, kind of like I could go to the end of the row and then he'd come around to help me turn it. He was hooked up behind with the single horse plow,
That's funny. You were the
so
mule.
it was a flatter area, but he's like, I was the mule, I guess, for a while because I'm dry, but he just, no, this is better for what we do. But yeah, so that's kind of been part of the history. In one sense, you go, hey, are we a little slow? But I guess it's kind of true to the tradition, and that's what we still try to do. I think that there's value that, especially in our industry. I think there is, you're trying to do new and different things and create. At the same time, I think in our industry really is wedded in a lot of historically, it's what's been done.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to appreciate that. I mean, I remember, we had I just completed some of my graduate work at Davis, and we had been doing leaf pulling work at that point. This was in the mid 80s and late 80s. And I was out with Dave Raffinelli, and he's, taking the laterals off and the leaves. And I said, how long you been doing this? Oh, we've been doing this forever.
Yeah.
Right. And it was some of the stuff that we were kind of looking at again. So sometimes in this business, and that's, I think, what was so important with me with having that historical or that um, kind of a hands-on perspective with
Yeah.
my grandfather. I mean, this is kind of how it was done, right? And you understood the why. Now, as you go to school and this, you kind of understand. Well, you understand the how. When you go to school, you kind of get the why. Here's why it's
Right.
happening. But I think it's neat still to this day to have that perspective of things.
Yeah.
Sometimes we think we know a lot, and usually when I think I know a lot, I'm in trouble because I always find that there's much more I could know.
I think it's funny, right? So some of these best practices that you think you're discovering
Yeah,
at Davis, you're like, oh no, we've been doing this. Like my grandfather used to do it
yeah.
this way, and so we would get things to ripen evenly. You're like, oh yeah, that's what we're just writing my thesis on. So you grew up now you didn't grow up you didn't grow up out there, did you? Or did you grow up in
I
town?
grew up in Hillsborough. Well, my dad was a banker. I grew up in Hopland for
Okay.
first few years, and then we moved back to Hillsburg. So I grew up mostly on Grove Street in Hillsburg. So we
Okay.
still have the house today, and so I was there. Went to Hillsburg High School. Kind of, was definitely pretty attached to the community.
Yeah. And so you knew right away because you went to Fresno, you studied viticulture, right? So you knew right from the get-go, like this is what I want to do. I want to be an ag.
No, I think that's what I liked. I mean, it's an interesting perspective. Both my grandparents went through the Depression, right? They
Yeah.
were of that age. So I think when I talked to them about that, they said you should be a doctor or lawyer. Whatever you do, don't go in the agricultural business. I think
Yeah.
is pretty close to the quote, which I
Definitely.
find telling my kids the same thing today.
Yeah.
Um, so I wasn't sure I wanted to do that. So I went to Fresno first, kind of was ag business, and then kind of slowly moved over and ended up, deciding that's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And then I thought about being an attorney for a little bit, but then I ended up going to Davis for my master's there. But yeah, no, I think I knew in my heart that's what I wanted to do. I think it's so interesting that you can create something that people can appreciate and
Yeah.
enjoy. You can tell a story. It's part of tradition. I still believe, even though as our industries change, that there's a special reason that we do this, and it has value. So I like that being connected to something. And then I had an ag teacher, Rod Wallstrom at Hillsburg High,
Hmm.
who wasn't that much older than us, but kind of very into that wine and vineyards, and that was helpful in terms of me seeing that as a potential for a kind of long-term employment.
Did you go right to Davis after graduating, or did you take a little time off, or how did that? Versus, now you start to get rarefied air for people on the viticultural side that now you've got an advanced degree. Did you know right away I'm going to keep going to school? I want to get my master's, or how'd that work?
I don't know if you want to know all the I got to think now, but
Yeah, this is a
I know
very.
I
I'm
was
going after everything. I need to
yeah,
know.
no, this is good. This is it makes me kind of go back and wonder. I finished at Fresno. I had, some kind of mentors there. One was Nick DeKuzlian, who I did a lot with, and then so he had gone on to Davis. I was actually going to study in Italy. I'd applied over there, and they basically, it was interesting. The in Turin, they were going to let me in, but the Italian ministry wanted me to have prior graduate work before I actually went.
Okay.
So because it's trying to compare the U.S. system and the European, and did that have And I said, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I applied to law school, got accepted there. I was golfing with some in the industry, and I remember they, not to offense anybody, but they said, Glenn, why would you want to be a lawyer? That's just another reason not to be liked. So I decided that wasn't the play. But and so I'd also applied to Davis. So I'd been accepted there. So I kind of had, it was this turning point, where do I want to go? And I think it was a great move. I ended up working with Dr. Mark Cleaver's lab at the time, pretty progressive in canopy management and practices there. So it was a good experience. And then I was kind of joining, Nick was getting his PhD at the time. So kind of a lot of relationships there. I
Yeah,
still kind of hold to this day, as well as Fresno. I mean, I think to me, it was interesting to have those two schools, which are fairly well respected in the industry and the contacts.
sure.
I still think this industry is about relationships. It's a little bit about who you know and how you comport yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been helpful in my career. Just having some contacts and you as you go on, you realize you're never sure. I think it's so important to kind of be the best that you can be in terms of how you carry yourself, because you never know, even if you think you're important, that, if you're working for the person that's working for you 2 years later, or you just never know. This industry changes and moves. And so it's over my history, I've kind of seen that. So I think it's important
Yeah.
to have those contacts and respect those relationships.
Yeah. I think like one of the first things I heard, and like I think a lot of people hear when you get your, into the industry is like, there's a, don't burn any bridges, right? Because, and I think you laid it out just perfectly. The person that may be under you today, 2 years from now, you might be interviewing with, you just don't know. And if you stick around long enough and you treat people right, and you work as hard as you can wherever you happen to be, and you leave the right way when because leaving sometimes can be very difficult. So there's a right and wrong way of doing it.
Yeah.
30 years later, if you don't know them, you know somebody who knows them, and people are always willing to sort of help each other out.
Yeah, no, it's a close industry, and I just you said it exactly right. And don't burn bridges. And I've seen examples
Yeah.
in places I've worked of some negative ways to comport yourself,
Yeah.
and seen some of the what those resulted in, right? But it's no, it's a good business. We're not making widgets, right? I mean, we're making something and that's interesting, that's consumed, that's enjoyed. I mean, it's not a bad place to be in terms of things you could be doing with your life and time.
I agree with you. I remember, early on, working at a very small winery and being on whatever we were doing, we all had to do a little bit of everything at a time. So maybe being on a tractor, being out in the vineyard and kind of going like, and growing up on, New Jersey, wasn't anything I planned. I just wound up out here and I didn't want to leave. So that's what I started doing in my 20s, and kind of going, wow, this is incredible, but with it, the other thing, it's not for everybody because it's very difficult. It's very challenging.
When
And
you said that there is a work hard kind of a thing. It's kind of hard to coast. And it used to be in this business, it was seasonal.
yeah,
That really doesn't exist anymore. It seems like you're kind of running, consistently. But I mean, you do have Mother Nature to deal with, and that the uncertainty of, growing something besides just the marketplace and that, but just this question of, different things that can happen,
yeah.
make it a little more challenging. I always joke is, if you're a grower or a farmer, you're probably not at the crap table laying down big bets because you've
Right.
already done that with your day job. So,
Exactly. That's really good. That's funny. Hey, you made me think about something. Was it like 2 years ago when the fires kind of ran through and got pretty, you were right. You guys had to be pretty darn close out there with the ranch, right? I mean, how close did it come to you?
so we've got a couple hundred acres out there, the terms of size, just, a lot of that's redwoods too.
Yeah.
But we about 130 acres burnt. Uh,
Wow.
So we lost like water storage, some electrical lines, but we didn't lose any structures and some fences, but we were pretty lucky. I think the one thing, with farming today, you do even you interact with your neighbors, and some of your neighbors maybe did come from New Jersey, and they're not completely understanding of how the farming works.
Yeah, yeah,
But we've always tried to kind of embrace that and educate. But I think what we were lucky is we had done some timber harvesting, so we had a logging road there, and because of the logging road that Cal Fire was able to clear, and then the vineyard, it pushed nobody on Pachoni Road had any damage per se because it pushed it kind of around. So if you look at this burn scar of Wallbridge, if you imagine it being like a little Pac-Man in the lower right-hand corner, there's like a little cutout.
yeah,
And that fire kind of went around us because we were able to have that, so, we always go back. That was kind of learning during the fires that, vineyards are actually, can limit the spread and suppress the fire in some ways, right? It actually helps that situation.
yeah.
And then because I think appropriately cared for the forest part, I think that was helpful. And I think it's good too, because there's learning. Most of the neighbors get that. Oh yeah, thank you. If you're doing this, it's an understanding of what we're trying to do versus, oh my God, you're cutting a tree. So I think there's also kind of a more openness,
Yeah.
but yeah, we got fairly lucky. I mean, if you go past where we are, I think 70 to 80 structures going out Mill Creek were burned or
Yeah.
lost. It was significant. Yeah, it was an interesting time. I remember going up there after the fire, and I'm top of the hill, and you know, and I'm sitting there, and most of the fire was out in our place, and the wind kicks up, and I said, "What am I doing here?" So maybe I don't want to, I probably want to get out of here. But in the uh, local fire and first responders, I mean, I think they've done such a good job in our community in terms of really trying to limit damage, and it's amazing what those men and women are do day in and day out.
No, it is amazing. And I imagine, now it's been a couple of years, things, Mother Nature's amazing too, right? So I know I have people that may not know where I'm talking about. So we got Stewart's Point uh road. Sometimes we go out the coast, and you can look at like a lot of the redwoods, the younger redwoods that were basically fried right from the fire. The next year they look like chia pets, and the next year they start like pushing branches, and it's like you start to like it doesn't take long before Mother Nature comes back, and you start to go, wow, it's this is incredible. It's like a rebirth.
It does. I mean, it's amazing. We did some stuff. We've been working with the forester, same guy for 20 years out there. So he knows our property well. So we did take the damaged trees out. I mean, I'm learning. I didn't really understand the timbers. I still don't, but I've gotten a little better. So we actually are working with Cal Fire right now in terms of kind of improving that property. So we're going through, because you've had a lot of this regrowth, but you want the regrowth that's the right regrowth, right? Because there's
Yeah,
other stuff coming back that could form future fire risk, or you've got
yeah,
the growth on the floor. So we're working to go in. We've actually got somebody out there right now with the grinder going through and cleaning up the ones you don't want. We'll probably go back through and spot control
yeah,
some of the species that we don't want to see, and then we'll also do some putting new seedlings in the ground. But it's interesting. I mean, and we were looking at this, you could see like these seedlings come up. And right, usually with the redwood, it kind of comes up at the base, right? It regrows from that base.
yeah.
According to the forester, I mean, I'm probably getting too deep into it, but I think this is interesting.
I don't care. Yeah, get into it.
When there's that smoke and fire, then the cones and the seeds, they open up more. It's like a survival.
Yeah,
So because we're going, why am I seeing like little seedlings out in the middle? And he goes, no, because that actually causes those things to open up more because the tree's trying to survive. So because you're looking out there in the middle of an open field, and there's a new redwood seedling, which is a little unusual. So
yeah.
yeah, but I think we're just trying to kind of keep it like it was, and keep things growing. But it's been really neat, and Cal Fire has been excellent to work with. It's a California Cal Fire Improvement Program. So there's some cooperation between them, and just enjoyed working with their team, and been very supportive.
Yeah, that must be a really cool thing to just be a part of, right? I mean, it's just so neat and so beautiful. I'll switch gears with you a little bit. You've also been, you're very involved in the industry, right? So not just from the, keeping your finger on the pulse of the grape and bulk wine market. You're currently, I think, the chair. Are you the chairman for the Sonoma County Wine Grape Commission?
I am not the chair,
Okay.
but I have been the chair in the past. So
Okay.
yes, I just kind of, I was on the commission, I think, 11 years approximately. So I've
Yeah.
kind of recently stepped off the board,
Okay.
but, uh, but yeah, I was involved with that as you were, the wine growers of Dry Creek Valley kind of
Yeah.
before that. So yeah, been a
That's
little bit
interesting.
involved.
I always tell people, I think a lot of the good things that happened to me in the industry was being involved with the association. So whether it was, Wine Growers Dry Creek or the Wine Road or Sonoma County Vintners, I made a lot of great friends that way. And it's a neat, it's just a good way to stay involved and stay in the know. And I think what Carissa Cruz and the Wine Grape Commission have done for our county is just incredible. And I just saw today that they got another like a $900,000 grant, and it's just like that's
Two
amazing.
grant that yeah, and you kind of need the organization to be in existence to do the things then so you can get the grants, right? The grants just don't come without the organization, and again, it's tough. I mean, it's an investment, but I mean, I think the belief still is you got to be talking about what you do and promoting it. And in any marketing plan, hopefully that takes root and other opportunities come from it. But I also think, I mean, I do think it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Um, there's a lot of good people in this business, and I think that work hard, try hard, try to work together and make good decisions. I remember this is a number of years ago. I was at Diageo, but we had a new president, nice guy, friends with him. But I remember we were talking about some different winemaking and viticulture practices and sharing that information. And he's like, well, and I think he came from the candy business. He's like, oh, you can't tell anybody about this. These are, and I said, no, you don't understand. We're all kind of like, we're going to these seminars, we're meeting over here. It's a different, that information, it's different in this business, right? And he still, again, I think he got it eventually, but I think that's what you see in those boards and groups, especially where you got people that aren't there trying to necessarily benefit themselves, but looking to how do I benefit the industry as a whole? Because by doing that, it puts me in a better position.
Yeah,
So,
no, there's no doubt that it's, I think, a beautiful example of all ships rise with the tide
yep.
industry. And I had similar experiences. When I worked for Beam, when they had a wine division, and we had Clos de Bois was our big boy, and especially in the Chardonnay that we produced there. And I was on the board with the guy named Clay Gregory, who was president of, I think it was just Kendall Jackson back then. It was before Jack's family. And of course, KJ, we're like always fighting for, and these are, a couple big boys out there. But we, it was like very friendly. We weren't sharing trade secrets, but we were all working together to help promote Sonoma County as a destination, as an ultra premium grape producing region, because if Sonoma County does well, we all do well. If Dry Creek Valley does well, we all do well in Dry Creek Valley. And it is interesting when you see people come in from outside, because I think it's unusual. I don't think that's not the norm in business. It's just another one of those unique things about this industry is like kind of we're all in it together. And when times are good, that's good. And when times are tough, you got to keep, and you really got to work together.
We're all in it together, whether it's tough or not, right? I mean, I think that's but yeah, I don't, yeah, I think that is, unique. I guess you go, why in this business? But that is one of the things that, make you kind of appreciate it. But yeah, no, I think we've got a lot of good groups out there, and it in general, my what I've seen is people, willing to work together and go, okay, what do we need to do? Do we need to come up with money? Do we need to do this? It's not like I'm not going to help you or
Right.
I'm just looking out for me. And I think long term that makes this business unique, and it hopefully makes it successful as we as we go forward. So I've tended to be involved. My dad was very involved in things, so that's probably affected. He was a mayor of Hillsburg,
Yeah.
Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, did all that stuff. So it probably had some, effect that, okay, it's good to get out there, participate. And it was neat. Like, I've got a son who just started at college, but and we didn't know, he was on the board as a student member of the Ag and Open Space Task
Um,
Force. So, and I was going watching. So it's kind of neat. I think that, giving back and participating in those things, even though it takes your time, is important.
One of the other things I thought was really interesting, and I wanted to kind of, again, I'm going to shift again, is so I know Ciatti keeps you incredibly busy. You're on the phone constantly. Every time I see you're actually either meeting somebody, you're talking to somebody all the time, uh, or you're out attending a board meeting, or you're presenting some data at pick a conference, uh, and then you're coaching your kids' little league and going to travel ball, and it's like I don't even know how, like, where do you find the time, dude? How do you make the time to make that all happen?
Well, you can't, I mean, again, my kids are older now, so I've been very involved. My younger one, and both boys have done sports. My younger
Yeah,
one's very, very focused on sports, and I coached him, was on the little league board, and I think I'd ask him every year, "Hey, do you want Dad to be a manager? Do you want me to
yeah,
be a coach? Do you want me to stay away?" Right? So it's kind of like, and I think he got to be 13, and I think it was like, "Okay, Dad, just come and watch me."
yeah.
So I said, "That's fine," but
Perfect.
that's, but I think, I don't know. I mean, I had kids a little later, but I just think you don't want to miss those chances to interact with your kids and your family. So, I never, I just don't want, I mean, I'm sitting there, I won't miss anything unless
Yeah,
there's a real reason. So that's important. So you try to stay involved, and you've figured this out. You've got, beautiful girls. It's like, you know, your passions become their passion, or their passions are yours, because
yeah.
that's how you stay involved and participate. But I did a program called California Ag Leadership. It was a couple years. It's a great program, and we've, more and more, there's new alumni in Sonoma County and in wine industry that are participating. It just kind of a who's who to some degree. But I remember it was like, you don't have the time for this program, but don't use the excuse that you don't have the time to not participate,
Right.
because anybody that's busy is the people we actually want in the program. So it's
Yeah,
almost like, you kind of have to make the time, but you got to set priorities, and but it's good to stay busy too, right? I mean, it's good to, this, I mean, you're very active. It's good to, kind of getting in, living in while you can live, right? Kind of, enjoy this thing. So
yeah.
yeah.
I've always wanted to be involved. I mean, I was the same with my kids, but professionally, it's like I'd rather have a seat at the table, or a voice, or that I can share with whatever we're talking about. Um, I find it fulfilling, and yes, sometimes it's not terribly convenient, but I have this thing. It's I kind of I don't know. I just made it up. It's like my tomorrow test. All right, how am I going to feel tomorrow if I don't do this or I do? And usually it's like, you know what, just go to the meeting, or just raise your hand. Just do the right thing. So we get back to the boys. So despite you guys said, hey, maybe wine's not for you guys. Maybe you should think about something else. Are the boys into agriculture? Is this something? Are they kind of following your footsteps?
Good questions and answers I don't necessarily know. Uh, I think, yeah, one has said he's interested,
Your
which
older
is
son, your older
a
boy.
younger boy, and
Okay.
there was no encouragement by me.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with sports or something. If they want to do it, great. You feed the passion, but you don't necessarily push, right? I mean, and so he's had some interest. My older son is going to study business.
Okay.
Uh, Um, so I don't know. We have our little wine brand. It isn't too big. Uh, but maybe eventually they decide to do something with that. Maybe they don't. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's fine. However, whatever they do with it, I'm not, I don't have it to pass it down per se. But yeah, no, I think we're encouraging them to get a solid, get an education. And then in our business too is, you really need just kind of a good background and then the willingness to kind of jump in there. So uh, yeah, I think whatever they find a passion, passion again, it's when you kind of want to be happy going to work. We used to, when people reporting to you, said it's like, most days when you go to work, not every day you're going to like, oh my God, I love going to work. But if you can do that 80% of the time,
Yeah.
that's not bad. Or like, I like being here. I like doing what I'm doing. It goes back to Maslow's theory of higher needs. We can get real crazy, but about, doing things that have importance and value and to you. And so hopefully they find some things that drive some of those passions within them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the hope and the goal. And if there's some stuff I can help them with, I'll drop everything and help them with it. But I
Yeah.
think they've got the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been exposed to it. I think when I was a kid, it there didn't seem to be as many diversions, right? So I was kind of in it, and you're there, and I'm at the ranch. With our boys, we've kind of exposed them to things, but not really, we didn't want to grind their nose, kind of
Right.
thing. Wanted to like, here's how it works, here's what we do, here's the vineyards, but it's not like I didn't want to scare them away, I guess.
Right. You weren't gonna like put them behind the plow and go, okay, it's
Right. And
plow
you're going to
plow
do
day.
this for 8 hours and I'm not, I'll come and see you and you better still be doing it. I don't think that works as well as it did a few years ago. So
And then now you said your son's he's a freshman this year in
yeah,
college.
I have a son in college. Yeah. So
Where's he going to school?
he's going to St. Mary's. So
Okay.
just,
Not too
so
far.
yeah, not too far, good school.
Yeah.
So we're excited. It's like it's our first. It's always you've been through this, but it's kind of interesting to do the drop off.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah, and then I've got my younger son's a senior in high school, so they're back to back.
Yeah, yeah. We just finished with Skylar, I think you probably
Yep.
know Skylar, just finished down at Cal Poly, and that was kind of interesting to have them both back here. And but it but it was parts of it were hard, as I'm sure you're starting to experience, but also very rewarding, and it's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, so
Harder on the parents and the kid.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So interesting times we're in right now. We chatted about this before we got the interview started, and it's no secret the wine industry has been, facing some. I love the word headwinds, right? We're facing headwinds. So it feels like hurricane headwinds sometimes.
yeah,
Because of the role that you play, I imagine you have to have some very difficult conversations with, with your grower. They're almost like your partners in a lot of ways, right? They're like your partners, and they're oftentimes your friends who don't have a home for their fruit. I'm sure there was some fallout with some people like when vintage wine estates and maybe some growers there got either
yep,
had contracts and they went away, or they were owed money and now they're like, how am I going to get my money? And then to make it worse for some of the guys go, okay, we didn't sell our grapes, but we're going to jump into the bulk wine market and we'll try to make it back that way. And the money's still sitting in the tank. So how do you, that's got to be the hardest part of your job when you don't have good news, for people. I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to hear about
it's. I mean, we find ourselves a little bit of because I think like in any normal person, you have expectations or kind of like you're like I'm going to call whoever, right? And it's like hopefully the information's positive, right? And so lately what we've been doing is kind of adding the reality to the market.
it. Yeah.
Like, yeah, that'd be great to think you got what you got paid last year on those grapes, but really let me go through what we're hearing, what we're feeling, what other people, and they're like, oh, so that's not even, so there's a little bit of that reality, but I think that's important if we kind of made it too if we didn't tell what we thought was going on, we're not
Right.
doing the right job for that client because they need to make decisions based on the moment. Now, as I told a client this morning, I said, hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully, if you make this into wine and sell it, you're going to sell it for $25 a gallon,
Yeah.
not 12.
Yeah.
But as I look at it today, that's what it feels like. So then here's how you need to kind of back into that and understand what your risk is if you do make it into wine, versus if you could do grapes and, understand that what the potential return is. So, But I think people do get the market. I think people are trying to understand what options they have.
Yeah.
It is tough because there just isn't a lot of options. We were hopeful we'd see a little more spot rape activity, and to date here at the end of August, we really haven't.
Yeah.
Uh, so there really seems to be a lot of hesitation with buyers. Again, we grew, from the early 90s to, 2018 pretty well, right? It was a couple percent, 2 to 3% a year. We were down 7 to 8% last year. That really shocked a lot of wineries, and I think they're trying to adjust and control costs because we're seeing consumers push back. So there just really is they don't want to take a risk. So like a lot of you even on grape, it's like, hey Glenn, I might be a little light, but I'm not going to buy anything. I need to like crush 20 or 30% to see if I'm light. Because if I end up buying something I don't need,
Yeah.
our CFO is going to come looking for me, right?
Yeah.
Because there's that kind of pressure to don't overspend, don't overcommit, because we don't know about or have a level of confidence, I guess is maybe the way to put it.
Yeah.
And it isn't worth taking that risk. So, you're trying to get creative with things. Sometimes we have some opportunities, but the best thing to do is, be direct, honest, and tell people what you think, and then understand that this thing could change faster than we know it,
Yeah.
and we've seen that before, right? There can be certain weather. I don't know, maybe Muscat takes off. I mean, there's other things that can happen dynamically in our business, whether it's domestic or international, that could change it. So I think but there's difficult decisions. Do I not pick this? Do I make it into wine? How much risk? A lot of times we talk to people about making sure you have the bandwidth to handle that risk.
Yeah.
I remember talking, this is a number of years, probably 20 years ago, talking to a grower, had 30 tons of cab. And he goes, well, I'm thinking of making this into bulk wine. I could scrape up enough money to make 15 tons into wine. And, my answer was, you don't have enough there. I mean, it's not worth you taking the risk, right? If you're
Right.
taking your last dollar for the fifth, so it's just trying to understand that. And then I think the other thing is just here's a possibility. Because the other thing is, let's say they said, oh, I need to get 2,000 a ton. We're saying, hey, maybe the market's, I don't know, 12, just to make up numbers.
Yeah.
Then if they actually get an offer at 12, maybe they take it versus going, oh, no, 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 I really thought I wanted this. So that's what, the reality of the market is, and that's what you have to deal with on the short term. But we're hopeful that I think what could happen is that we are very hesitant. There's just a lot of that inability to take risks. At some point, you're going to need something, right? You're going to over adjust.
Yeah.
Even in a down market, when you're selling less cases, at some point, if everybody's going, I don't want to, I'm releasing contracts, I'm running away from supply, at some point you're going to need it.
Yeah.
When is that a dynamic change? Is that a slow inflection point? I think those are things we're going to see. We'll still have to feel. I think you're looking at acres removed with the severity of kind of, I think, where things are at, you're going to see more acres, especially older vineyards that are not as productive or have some issues being pulled out, probably more than we think
Yeah.
as we move through this. So we're going to figure out a way to kind of right the ship, but I think you've got to stay, it's kind of staying around until that situation kind of corrects itself. And it's not
Yeah.
going to be for everybody is the challenge. But yeah.
And not everybody who's in the game right now may be in the game tomorrow, and maybe that's okay for the folks that are. But I know, like during COVID, thinking as an example, like this is not the time to hunker down for like what we were doing. Like, sometimes it's like, okay, this is the time to stay aggressive, and I think a lot of it too, and it's, whether people believe it or not, it's like just your frame of mind, so if you're focusing on the positive and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I need to do to make up for what I'm, make up for what I'm losing, versus just trying to focusing on keeping what I've got. Like, I feel like that's the worst type of thinking. And that sort of mindset sort of takes you down a path whether you
Right,
realize.
you tend to, yeah, you kind of like fait accompli, right? I mean, it's going to be, you're going to, what you think, I mean, you're going to end up in a worse position. We've seen, like, had some people back in Hong Kong at a recent show, and there's one, winery owner that has 300,000 cases. He's out there, hey, can I do this? What about this? Thinking you've got, so I think it's taking measured risk, right? It's not like, hey, let's bet it all on black, but
Right.
it's like, oh, hey, maybe you've seen some wineries, I'm going to buy this brand, or I'm going to try this packaging or low alcohol, or see some stuff that sticks. And then I can use that to kind of grow from, it's learning, and
Yeah.
it's also trying to expand your reach with different consumers. Because I mean, again, the consumers are shifting, right? That, we are eating food differently, with COVID and just than we did 15, 20 years ago. Younger consumers are looking at wine probably a little differently. How do we engage that? Even when you look at DTC and tasting room business, it looks like there's some different experiences there.
Yeah.
So it's, how do I look at that differently, I think is how we're going to get through this, right? Is being creative and appropriately aggressive, or, as you said, you can't just sit there on your stool and go, what do I do? I think you've got to try something, and that's why I'm optimistic. Again, long term, I think we are going to find some opportunities, but I mean, the challenge is just, it's like I keep saying, it's not that we have too many grapes, it's that we have too few sales. And
Right.
too few sales, because if you go back and look at this, it wasn't like the early, excuse me, the late 90s where we just planted like crazy, right? This is more, we were kind of planning appropriately, but then supply just kind of dropped out of the sky. So we're having to adjust for that.
Yeah.
And that's going to take some time. But my belief is, again, if this market is still, if we don't see some pickup on the grape side, that if you're a grower out there, you're going to say, hey, I've had this, I'm farming it. You know what? I don't know. I didn't sell it this year. It's an older vineyard. Maybe this isn't, maybe I'm pulling it out and then see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because the other thing we are seeing in our business, even in the high value areas of the state, like Napa and Sonoma, it's coming back to efficiencies. I need to get tons per acre. I need to get, looking at my return per acre. You've got to get some efficiencies, I
Yeah.
think, the way the buyers are looking at the market today. So,
Well, I think, the necessity being the mother of invention. I'm hoping that, and what I anticipate is, tough times usually brings out the best in people, and we're going to continue to see, innovative thinking, people maybe trying some things that they haven't tried before, some of which is going to stick and, make a difference. But, it's, we'll know better when we have this conversation 2 or 3 years from now, how the story, unfolded. But, fingers crossed that things start to turn around and people start to just come out of it, because I do, even the folks that we work with, and I mentioned this earlier,
yep.
on the vendor side, it's like everyone is just so uncertain, and it's a little bit scary, but at the same time, like, wine's not going away. It's just, it's just something that's been with us forever. And as much as you go, you hear what conversations about the RTDs or what's happening in spirits, it's like wine is still sort of in a category all by itself, even within the alc beverage category. And I remain optimistic. I mean, that's my just the way I'm wired, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think you said it though. You've got to have some optimism. I mean, because I think if you don't, then probably you're exiting the business too, right? I mean, I think you're sitting there going, what is my exit strategy? So if you're gonna, stay in for the long haul, you've got to, I think be looking at those wine opportunities. And I think you're right. Wine's a unique beverage. Um, and I think we're going to find that consumer, we're going to find that equilibrium that works as we go forward. I don't know exactly where it's going to be, but I mean, wine's going to be around. I'm
Yeah.
I'm just looking at people like with packaging and size and and I was just, it's amazing to see. I was looking at like some bag in the boxes that are smaller for more premium wines.
Yeah.
Is it access? Is it convenience? I mean, I've been impressed with the lower alcohol. You've got guys, hey, we made some lower alcohol wines, and
Yeah.
we spun them down. Well, now we're actually harvesting a little lower. We're actually designing the system around that product, so it makes the wine taste better. It makes our system more efficient. So yeah, and I think the other thing we continue to see, there is, as people exit, we see people looking at some of that as an opportunity to enter.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you could argue they're not as smart. I don't know, but I think they're looking at that with a different lens and saying, okay, based on if I can come in and buy this asset, maybe it's not fully valued, but
Right.
relative to the market, and so there is this kind of new energy, new dollars, and then hey, the interest rates might come down, and hopefully that's going to benefit small and medium-sized businesses and our ability
Yeah.
to borrow and kind of get through some of this too. So
Well,
yeah.
it's some new ideas, right? I think people that they're entering, they're not looking through the same lens as their predecessor, and so they're not constrained by this idea of like, well, this is the way we do it. Why? Well, it's because it's the way we've always done it. It's like they don't have those same constraints, right? So that's the kind of energy I think that it's going to take to change things, and I think
Yeah.
things will change. So
I think, and I think we have the people in the business to do that. Both big and small companies kind of trying to attack that. So, but it's just not going to happen overnight. So that becomes, there's still, it's tough. I've got these grapes. What do I do with them? We wish we had better answers. But I think this thing's going to work its way through.
well, I
So,
like the way you were phrasing it up before. It almost reminded me of like a doctor's visit. Like, listen, here's the deal. I'm not going to bullshit. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is exactly what's happening. These are your options, and make
yeah.
it. That's all you
But
can do is just provide the truth.
But you still like the doctor, if it was he couldn't do anything, going, hey, you look really good, Glenn. Everything's great.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day out there. Oh my God. Well, Glenn, listen, this has been great. This has been fun. Appreciate you taking some time to
Yep.
be with us. It was fun for me to kind of learn some things
Oh,
because we're always like meeting each other when you're busy and I'm busy, but it was selfishly a good chance for me to like learn a little bit more about you and how you grew up. So thank you for joining us. And for those of you in the audience, I hope you enjoyed it. If you like the show, go ahead and like our YouTube page, and we'll keep you posted on our next Win Insider series. Thanks,
yeah.
Glenn.
Thank you very much, George. Appreciate it, huh? Take care.